going, guys? Winter Kills here, and welcome back to an updated Nekroz deck profile. Now, recently we've just gotten a new ban list. I know it's not probably what everybody was looking for, but in the grand scheme of things, it does make sense for the most part. Obviously, I guess you could really call it an unban list more than anything. Fortunately, I was, somebody who played a deck that was actually affected by the most recent ban list, the unban list, and obviously we now have Unicorn to 3, and this deck is quite literally almost at full power. I would say 99% full power, really just missing that clutch Lavavel Chain and generally serve rituals, which I don't think we're getting anytime in the near future, and rightly so. That would make things pretty degenerate, even more so than they already are. So I'm going to bring you guys my current up-to-date list for the new June 2020 ban list. I hope you guys enjoy it. And again, remember, of course, first and foremost, this is simply a template for you guys to take and build upon. None of my choices, of course, are set in stone to anybody's builds. And obviously shouldn't be taken as such. So just figured I'd put that on the table. We're going to go and get into the standard profile, then go ahead and take a look at the deck breakdown. But before we do, I want to mention a quick shout out to Imperium Duelist, provider and maker of this amazing, beautiful two-player Demon Slayer themed cloth playmat. They have this mat and many other playmats like it on their site. If you guys are interested in picking one of these up, whether it be one of their Millennium themed ones, etc., etc., you can get it all down at the link below to their website, ImperiumDuelist.com, and you can get all the stuff for 10% off using that discount code WinterKills10 off. They have dice, they have deck boxes, they have sleeves like I'm rocking here on the main and extra deck, and they also have really awesome looking mat bags featuring some artwork of cards like Magispector Kirin, Shaddoll Construct, Evil Swarm Exciting Knight, you name it. So check them out. They have a lot of great products, and you can support the channel in the process. And if you guys are picking up any cards on TCG Player, do not forget to use that affiliate link down in the description below, because a small bit of the revenue of your purchase will go right back into the channel, which of course is always helpful. And if you want to get in on some exclusive perks and rewards, consider hitting that join button below. More information can be found there. So let's go ahead and get into the standard profile. First and foremost, 3 Nekroz of Unicorn. Good to have you back, my friend, finally at 3. It's been a long time coming. Then we have 3 Nekroz of Bryanak to follow that up. 2 Nekroz of Trishula, 2 copies of Nekroz of Valkyris, 1 Nekroz of Gungnir, and 2 copies of Nekroz of Clauselus. Next up, we have 3 copies of Incantation Chalice Slime, 1 Seravis the Ancient and Ascended, 1 Cyber Angel Ben 10, and that rounds out our ritual monsters. Moving forward, we have 2 Incantation Talismandra, 2 Incantation Candle, and 2 Incantation Pencil Plume. That rounds out our Incantation lineup outside of the Chalice Slimes, obviously, the non-ritual Incantations. Then for our normal summons for the deck, we have 3 copies of Zaborg, the Mega Monarch. Such a huge power play for this deck. Definitely raises the overall ceiling of the deck, hands down. Then we have 1 all-important Vanity's Ruler, of course, searchable via Ben 10. Great Floodgate, and 1 Manju of the 10,000 hands to bring our normal summon count up to 5, because sometimes having this card search off the Ben 10 can be more favorable, and we'll talk more about the Manju choice a little bit later. And the last 2 monsters in the main deck, 2 copies of Shurit, Strategist of the Nekroz. Now we'll move into the spell lineup. We have 3 copies of Dark Lure No More, obviously. I think it's kind of a no-brainer for this deck. 3 copies of Prep Rites, 2 copies of Nekroz Cycle, 1 copy of Nekroz Mirror, 2 copies of Nekroz Kaleidoscope, 1 Incantation Inception, and that rounds out our spells. And moving into the traps, we have just 3, being only these evenly matched. So that rounds out our 46 card main deck. I've always been pretty comfortable with going over 40 cards with the deck, as consistent and versatile as Nekroz is. So 46 cards. Now we'll move into the extra deck, where we have 1 Armatile, the Chaos Phantom, 1 Elemental Hero, Cosmo Neos, 1 Trishul, the Dragon of Icy Imprisonment, and 2 copies of Elder Entity, Entis. That rounds out our fusion lineup. For our singles, we have 1 Stardust Warrior, 1 Psyframe Lord Omega, 1 Bryanak, Dragon of the Ice Barrier. Then we have 3 copies of the all-important Herald of the Arclight. That is it for our synchros. And then for the Ixies, we have 1 Diguster Emerald, 1 Abyss Dweller, and 1 Totally Awesome, the only one that we can play. And last but not least, one Nephthys, the Sacred Flame, as our only link monster within our extra deck. So now we're going to go into the main deck to break down. We're going to go in a more in-depth look at the entire profile and discuss the role of each card in the deck, based into categories of starter cards, superior extenders, additional extenders, defense, removal, and floodgates within the main deck. And we'll talk about each card when we get to it. So I'm going to go ahead and sort the deck, and we'll move on to that. Alright, so now we're going to take a look at our starter cards for the deck. These are basically cards that help to facilitate our engine and have the easiest activation requirements as such. So we'll take a look at the first card here, which is Nekroz of Bryanek, which we obviously are playing at 3. Basically a Stratos for the deck. And one thing to note, a lot of our Nekroz ritual monsters do serve dual purpose, so if you see them pop up in other roles, that is why these cards are extremely versatile, so they can cross between roles. But first and foremost, Nekroz of Bryanek is a really powerful searcher for the deck. Basically says you can discard this card to add a Nekroz monster from your deck to your hand, except itself. And the other effect is you can target up to 2 face-up monsters on the field that were special summoned from the extra deck and shuffle them into the deck. So hands down, amazing search card, 100%. Starting your turn with this card is pretty much always going to leave you in a good position, or at least better off than you would be without it. Now moving on here, we have 2 copies of Nekroz Clausulus, very similar to that of Bryanek, but not as broad in its capabilities of what it can search. Basically, you can discard it to add a Nekroz spell or trap from your deck to your hand. There are no traps within the Nekroz archetype as of right now, which doesn't mean that can't change in the future, but basically can search out any of your Nekroz ritual spells. The thing about Bryanek, though, and the reason I like playing 3 over, instead of 3 Clausulus is because Bryanek can essentially turn himself into Clausulus. So I think playing 2 Clausulus, you could even sometimes maybe go down to 1 if you really wanted to. But Clausulus does have another effect, which basically says it's on field effect, quick effect. You can target 1 face-up monster on the field that was special summoned from the extra deck until the end of this turn. That target's attack becomes 0. Also, that target's effects are negated. So a little bit of defensive properties within this card as well. Then we have 3 copies of the Incantation Chalice Slime. This card is great. It's basically a Clausulus and a Bryanek sort of mixed together, because we can reveal this card on our hand, discard any card, and then special summon a incantation monster from our deck except itself. Get an additional search from there, whether it be off of our Talismandra, our Pencil Plume, or our Candle. But it does have another effect that says if we do not ritual summon after we use that effect, we lose 2,500 life points in the end phase, so you do have to keep in mind of that. But this card is great. I love maxing out of this card because it just really adds more consistency to the deck as a whole. Essentially, its ability to become any incantation and basically be any ritual spell or monster or ritual monster in a grave, at a moment's notice. So I really do like it for those reasons. Then we have 3 Prep of Rites. This card is basically just crack for the deck. Not a once per turn, which is the biggest thing about this card. Basically says add a level 7 or lower ritual monster from your deck to your hand. Then you can add 1 ritual spell card from your graveyard to your hand. So the last effect is optional. You do not need a ritual spell in the graveyard to activate and resolve this card. But basically can search you pretty much any card in your entire deck if you think about it in terms of it being able to grab Chalice Slime, which can get Candle, which can get you a ritual spell, or it can get you any of your Nekroz ritual monsters outside of Valk and Trish. But again, those cards can be searched through Bryanek, which this card can search, or it can be searched out through Talismandra, which this card can search Chalice Slime. So this card can really get you any card in your entire deck and some resources back from the grave, which is very, very nice. Last but not least, for our starter cards, the Manju of the 10,000 Hands, very easy normal summon to commit to the field. The reason I wanted to go in on just 1 Manju with this build is because with 3 Unicorn back in the game, we can basically be a little bit more lenient with when we make rank 4s, whereas before, you really didn't want to sacrifice your one and only Unicorn to go underneath something like a Dweller, Exciton, Knight, Daigusto, Emerald, whatever it may be, because once that, Unicorn hit the grave, you really had no way to get it back outside of using your Emerald on it. But now you can sort of, have the option to put back other resources to use later and just search out another Unicorn next turn. Because oftentimes, once your Unicorn hit the grave, you had no way to get it back. which was really unfortunate. And obviously Unicorn being such a powerful card as it is, that's really obviously a key win con to the deck, is to get access to Unicorn. And if it hits the grave, you kind of lose a lot of gas. But having multiple certainly helps, and having the Manju within the main deck helps as well, because we do play Cyber Angel Ben 10, which of course when tributed can search a light fairy from our deck to our hand. So in some cases you're pretty much going to always go, I guess, for the Vanity's Ruler, but sometimes it's not always going to be the most optimal play to go for Vanity's Ruler, and sometimes setting up with a Manju play as your normal summon may be a little bit better. And of course can allow you to go into a rank 4 play alongside Unicorn to get out Dweller or Daguster Emerald, whatever you really need at that current moment. So that's it for the starter cards. Now we'll go into our superior extenders. These cards help to build upon the plays our starters make, and do have oftentimes a little bit higher activation requirement, but not so much so as additional extenders. So we'll start with our incantations. The 2 Talismandra, of course, the 2 Candle, and then last but not least, the 2 Pencil Plume. So Chalice Slime not being listed here, even though it's an incantation. These incantations work obviously a little bit differently. These ones require you to reveal certain types of cards in the hand, only to special summon itself out from the hand in an incantation from your deck with a different name than the one that you just used. So Pencil Plume will require you to reveal a ritual monster in hand. Candle requires you to reveal a ritual spell, and Talismandra, like Pencil Plume, requires you to also reveal a ritual monster. So again, that lends itself to needing a little bit more setup, a little bit of a higher activation requirement again than compared to that of Chalice Slime, which can just be discarded itself to summon out any of these to get any of their effects. So when Pencil Plume is special summoned from the deck, it can add a ritual monster from the grave back to your hand. When Candle is special summoned from the deck, it can add a ritual spell from your deck to your hand. And when Talismandra is special summoned, it can add a ritual monster from your deck to your hand. So these guys are very versatile in what they can get, a wide range of stuff. But again, when they reveal themselves in the hand, the one that is revealing in the hand, you can't special summon from the deck because you've already activated that one's effect, and you can only use each of their effects once per turn. So you got to kind of be careful there which ones you're using and when you want to use them. So if you have Chalice Slime in hand per se, and a Talismandra in hand, you really wouldn't want to pitch Chalice Slime to summon Talismandra, because then the Talismandra in your hand becomes dead when you could have potentially used it to summon out a Candle or Pencil Plume from the deck, depending on if you had another ritual monster in your hand. So keep that in mind, but these cards add greatly to our searching capabilities in the deck, and they also can act as tribute or tribute fodder for our normal summons like Zaborg and Vanity's Ruler on the board, or act as tribute fodder for ritual summons through either Mirror or Cycle or Incantation Inception. Now moving on to more of our superior extenders, we have Shuret, Strategist of the Nekroz. Not only can this card be substituted as the entire requirement for a ritual summon of a Nekroz ritual monster, but when tributed by a card effect, it can also add us a Nekroz warrior monster from our Nekroz warrior ritual monster from our deck to our hand, so that can search us Trish, Clausulus, and Bryanak for next turn, or to continue to extend with, which is obviously really good. Not to mention, of course, its ability, like I said earlier, to act as the entire tribute for any of our ritual summons. So that makes summoning, obviously, big monsters like Valkyris, Gungnir, and Trishula very, very easy to do, and we get a little something out of it in the process. You can even tribute this off of Valkyris' on-field effect to get a search on top of it, on top of the draws. Then we have the Cyber Angel Ben 10, very similar to that of Shuret. It gets its effect when tributed. We can add a light fairy from our deck to our hand, so it basically helps us set up the Vanity's Ruler play. But it can also search Manju, like we mentioned, if need be, depending on what the situation calls for. Then we have our ritual spells. Obviously, we couldn't play a ritual deck without the ritual spells. These cards, of course, do play an important role. But of course, we need both. In a ritual deck, you need the ritual spell and the ritual monster together in most cases. So this card, not always going to be able to meet its requirements immediately. Kaleidoscope, I would say, is probably the easiest one, but then again, you need the Unicorn hand to go with it. Cycle can let us summon Nekroz monsters from our graveyard, which is amazing. Cycle can allow us to ritual summon Nekroz monsters from our hand, but we can also banish Nekroz monsters from the grave, Shuret included, so we can just extend further with Shuret's in grave. And Kaleidoscope lets us, tribute monsters from our extra deck, which is, of course, how we're, using that gimmick of using Herald of the Arclight in the extra deck to get an additional search when we summon out something like Unicorn. And Incantation Inception is very, very nice because we oftentimes will have extra incantations on our board, but this card lets us ritual summon any ritual monster using only incantation monsters, but the thing is we can exceed the level of the monster we're trying to summon with the monsters we're tributing. So we can essentially tribute a 6 for a 4, or, you know, tribute 2 cards for something like Trish, like a 4 and a 10, or a 4 and a 6, my bad, for total levels of 10, which is nice. So this makes this card very, very versatile and able to use it in multiple different ways. But also has another effect where basically we can send an incantation card from your hand or face-up field to the graveyard, except itself. Special summon 1 incantation monster from your deck, then add this card from your graveyard to your hand. So not only will you basically get to clear something off the field to get an additional search, but you get this card back in the process. So this card is outright fantastic. Only need 1 though because it is very easily searched. And the other Nekroz ritual spells here, they also have effects in the graveyard that while you control no monsters, you can banish it and another Nekroz monster to add a Nekroz spell from your deck to your hand, including the card that you banish. So if your field is cleared, you can get more searches out of it in the process for the following turn. Now we're going to take a look at our superior or our additional extenders, which have higher activation requirements than that of our superior extenders and starters, but these cards add more so to the power level of the deck, not so much the consistency. That's why there's going to be a fewer number of these, usually in most cases. So we have 2 Nekroz of Valkyris. Obviously, it does offer the battle phase protection, which is great. It can outright end the battle phase by discarding it and banishing a Nekroz card in our graveyard. But it also says the other effect where during your main phase, you can tribute up to 2 monsters from your hand and or field to draw the same number of cards you tributed. So this can help to clear the field to make your Nekroz ritual spells engrave live to get more pluses for next turn. And, you know, just get another search in the end phase, or not in the end phase, but before your turn's over to just grab a Valkyris to make sure you don't get OTK'd. Which isn't as much as a viable strategy as nowadays because a lot of times our opponent can put up negates very, very easily. So not such a viable strategy, but a strategy nonetheless. But Val can help us extend through its drawing capabilities, which is very nice. Then I put Unicorn here. I would put this card in another role also, but we'll get to that in a moment. But secondly, it can act as an additional extender because we can discard this to add a Nekroz card in our graveyard back to our hand. Unicorn's discard effect is weird because it's one of the few Nekroz ritual monsters where we rarely use its discard effect. Pretty much all other Nekroz ritual monsters, we use their discard effects quite often. Unicorn is a little bit different as we don't really use it because we're oftentimes trying to get him onto the field, but now that he's at 3, we can be a little bit more lenient in when we use that. But also, Unicorn, of course, can act as a massive floodgate by negating the effects of all face-up monsters special summoned from the extra deck. So very, very powerful card nonetheless. And the last 3 additional extenders are Zaborg the Mega Monarch. I'm playing Zaborg alongside Vanity's Ruler and of course the Manju as you saw earlier, but I'm playing Zaborg also because this deck, when it comes down to it, and I've said it before and I'm sticking to it, is because it just needs a higher ceiling than that of just Unicorn, because of that in some cases just does not cut it. But basically this card, if it was tribute summoned, you can target a monster on the field and destroy it. Then if it was a light monster, both players send as many cards as possible from their extra deck to the graveyard, but not more than the original level / rank of that destroyed monster. So in most cases, it's pretty much always going to be 8 because we're going to be destroying Zaborg himself. Then it says if this card was tribute summoned by tributing a light monster, add this additional effect. You choose the cards your opponent sends to the graveyard. So you can basically choose 8 cards out of your opponent's extra deck and just dump them to the grave, which is very, very relevant in today's meta since a lot of decks are taking advantage of the same old Link monsters, which consist of things like Access Code Talker, Celine, Link Cross, Needle Fiber, or Rorodon, just to name a few. So this card can be very, very potent. And again, the incantations come in very clutch by giving us very easy tribute fodder. And I believe 2 of the incantations we play in the main deck are light. So oftentimes, majority of the times, you'll be able to choose those 8 cards you're sending to your opponent's grave. So very, very powerful card. It's not searchable like the Vanity's Ruler is, but again, you would just want to sort of increase the overall chances of seeing a very powerful normal summon in your opening hand. And Zaborg does that job. So now we're going to go into protection, or defense, essentially. which we have our 2 copies of Nekroz of Trishula, our 1 copy of Saravas the Ancient Ascended, our 1 copy of the Nekroz of Gungnir, and you could also include in this the Nekrozes of Valkyris, alongside that of the Nekroz of Clausulus, because these cards essentially all act in very defensive ways. First, we'll talk about the Trishula. Basically, it says if a Nekroz monster you control were to be targeted, you can basically, or Nekroz monster or monsters you control were to be targeted, you can discard this card to negate the activation, which is important for protecting cards like Unicorn. Gungnir can prevent the destruction of any Nekroz monster by card effect or battle for the rest of the turn, which is really great. Also, it does offer a bit of removal, which we'll get to in a moment. Saravas is fantastic because it really helps us to protect things like Zaborg and Vanity's Ruler from things like Impermanence, Eldritch the Golden Lord, or Effect Veiler, or Ghost Immortal, Moonlit Chill, whatever it may be, helps protect non-Nekroz things, because it just basically says when your opponent activates a card or effect that targets a monster you control, you can discard this card, negate the activation, which is obviously fantastic. And it's searchable because it's a ritual monster within our deck. And we have here 2 Nekroz of Valkyris. Again, more defensive properties because it says when an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can banish 1 Nekroz card from your graveyard and discard this card, negate the attack, then end the battle phase. So just tons of protection, and it's all searchable. And of course, last but not least, the Clausulus effect, which basically says quick effect, we can target a face-up monster in the field that was special from the extra deck, and until the end of this turn, that target's attack becomes 0, and that target's effects are negated. So really, really strong card there nonetheless. So lots of defense here in the main deck, which is nice. Now we're going to go into removal, and first and foremost, we'll talk about the Trish, the Gungnir, and we'll also take a look at the Bryanak, because Bryanak does offer quite a bit of removal in of its own right. So we basically have these in-engine removal cards, which is nice. In-engine's core removal, core spot removal. Bryanak can basically target up to 2 face-up monsters on the field that were special summoned from the extra deck, shuffle them into the deck. So really, really strong. After you Dark Lure no more an entire field, you can just spin 2 cards back for basically free. Nekroz of Gungnir says during either player's turn, discard a Nekroz card, then target a card on the field, destroy it, which is nice. So a little bit of spot removal there. And Nekroz of Trishula basically says when this card is ritual summoned, you can banish exactly 3 of your opponent's cards, 1 each from their hand, field, and graveyard. The card in the hand is chosen at random. And again, this card is different than the Synchro Trish because all cards that you're banishing have to be in those 3 areas. Have to be in the hand, have to be in the field, have to be in the grave. If your opponent does not have a card in the hand, you cannot resolve this card. If your opponent doesn't have a card in the field, you cannot resolve this card. If your opponent doesn't have a card in the grave, you cannot resolve this card. So keep that in mind. Do not make that mistake and thinking that you can use it like the Synchro Trish, because you won't be able to. And then more removal here, more generic removal. Dark Lure no more and evenly matched. I wanted main deck board wipes because this deck has a hard time dealing with going second into some of these really combo heavy boards. And Dark Lure no more and evenly matched do a really good job at dealing with those things. And I didn't want to play Super Poly anymore since I'm playing Zaborg, and the extra deck targets do kind of matter now. And I feel like Dark Lure no more is just a better Super Poly at this point in time, so that is why I'm playing them. Now the last thing I want to talk about is our main deck Floodgates, which of course you could probably already tell what they are, but that is 3 Nekroz of Unicorn and the 1 Vanity's Ruler. Unicorn obviously shutting off the extra deck monsters. All extra deck monsters, any monster special from the extra decks, their effects are negated. That is, of course, as long as this card is on the field, which is great. But we also have the Vanity's Ruler, which is searchable via the Cyber Angel Benten, but basically says your opponent cannot special summon monsters. And basically, if you open Bryanak with any other incantation, you can set this card up turn 1, hands down, and oftentimes ways to protect it in the process through things like Saravas. So that is pretty much it for the entire main deck. Now we're going to go through the extra deck here and basically do a brief run through of all the cards' purposes in the extra deck, and then we'll talk about the side deck and wrap things up from there. Okay, to start for the extra deck, we'll start with our one and only Link monster, which ends up just being Nephthys, the Sacred Flame. This card I really like in here because oftentimes you will find yourself in situations where you have some leftover ritual monsters on the field, and you need really a more powerful play to go into than just leaving them on the field, because a lot of times most of your Nekroz ritual monsters don't do too much on their own to sort of establish a really unbeatable boss monster. I mean, Unicorn is a great Floodgate, don't get me wrong, but it's not as powerful as Nephthys the Sacred Flame can be when you're really trying to seal off the game. Because basically, if you link summon this card using all ritual monsters, it cannot be destroyed by battle, it cannot be destroyed by card effects, it gains 2400 attack, and it also cannot be targeted. So it'll go up to 4800, can't be targeted, destroyed by battle, or by card effects, and oftentimes can be outright a game ender. It's basically like the BLS link, but better for ritual decks. That's the way I would put it. In some cases, making this against Altergeist or Sky Striker, it's just a hands down instant win. So this card I would recommend playing at least one of in the extra deck. Now moving forward, we have our Totally Awesome, which is totally awesome. One obviously to send off of the Zaborg to get back any Nekroz card in the grave. Abyss Dweller for floodgating options with Unicorn and Manju, and Digaster Emerald for the resource management play if need be. So that is it for the Xyz. Now we'll go into the Synchros, where we have 3 copies of Herald of the Arclight. Our main Unicorn our main Kaleidoscope target rather for a Unicorn. When it hits the grave, we can basically add a ritual monster or spell from our deck to our hand, which is great. Searches pretty much any card in the entire deck, and we can send all of them off of our Zaborg to get 3 successive searches. 1 Brionac for very, very easy access to the Nekroz of Brionac off of our Kaleidoscope. 1 Psyframe Lord Omega to be able to send off of Zaborg to add back an additional Herald back to our deck once we've exhausted, or back to our extra deck once we've exhausted our extra deck of Heralds. We'll still need more to be able to follow up with the Unicorn on the field, and Omega is the way to do that. Stardust Warrior is just a level 10 Kaleidoscope target that we can use to get per se Brio and Unicorn on the field with. For our fusions, we have 2 Entis, basically again another card that we can send in mass off of Zaborg to clear cards, because when it's sent to the graveyard, we can target a card on the field and destroy it, or we could basically send this off Kaleidoscope if we need instant spot removal. A copy of Trishula, the Dragon of Icy Imprisonment, in level 9, in case you want to summon something like Brio and Clauselus. Keep in mind you can't send a level 9 for Trish because it says it can be ritual summoned using anything other than a level 9 monster, so you will need to keep that in mind. But yeah, you can basically summon Brio Klaus with this and do a lot of extra deck damage to your opponent. 1 Elemental Hero, Cosmo Neos. This is a level 11 again, a Kaleidoscope target. And Armatile, same thing, Kaleidoscope target. But now, most importantly, you can dump this to summon 3 Unicorns from your hand all at once if you happen to open that bad. So that's just a little fun thing that you can do. But that's it for the extra deck. Now we'll take a look at the main deck and talk about side decking. Some cards that I would side out would probably be these 6 cards right here. If you knew hands down you were going to be going first, because I like keeping these in blind if you are going first game 1, because if you lose die roll and you're playing combo, you're going to wish you have these in the main deck. Or you could, play a clean cut 40 and not play any combo hate within the main deck if you like, so that's an option. But I do prefer to playing these 6 cards in the main deck. But game 2, if you know you can go first, I would recommend siding these out, and you can put something in like Call by the Grave to protect your plays even more, or maybe another copy of Saravis for more protection for Vanity's Ruler plays, or Summon Limit. I'll put a sample side deck up on the screen here. But you could also side out something like an extra Trish. You could side out an extra Valk, and there's another card in here that you could also side out here. And what exactly was that card? The other card I would side out to could probably be a copy of Gungnir. Again, if you really needed the extra space to side in some cards, you could. 9, roughly 6 to 9, or 6 to 8 copies, that you, or 6 to 8 cards that you could side out with this deck, at least in this particular build. So yeah, that's gonna do it. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope it's what you guys were basically expecting. Hopefully I didn't disappoint, but this is pretty much how I would build and play my Nekroz list in this current format. Obviously, with Unicorn being at 3, I think this deck does have potential to be a pretty good rogue strategy. I wouldn't consider it meta by any means. Maybe if we got Jin and the Lavable Chain, maybe would be a little bit better, obviously with that very powerful lock. But again, we basically have a lock in the form of Vanity's Ruler now. But it's a little harder to set up, especially without Lavable Chain, etc., etc. But I don't know. Maybe it's about just as equal to setup. I don't know. But yeah, that's gonna do it for this profile. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. I actually had to film this video twice because the first time I recorded it, I did not have this mic on that I'm using to record audio. So that was really really fun. But again, I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a like if you did. Again, of course, this is just a template for you guys to take and build upon yourselves to make your own variants if you'd like to do so. But also, I want to give a shout out to Stealth in my Discord for sending me 4 of these 3D printed custom Winter Kills Field Centers. I'll probably be trying to paint some of these soon and maybe give away 3 and keep 1 for myself. So I just wanted to show this off in a video because this thing is absolutely amazing. Like I said, I got 4 of them. I might give away 3 at 20k. Who knows? But yeah, huge shout outs to you, man, for making these and sending them my way because they do look very, very awesome. So yeah, that's going to do it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. As always, Winter Kills signing out. We'll see you guys in the next one. And of course, a huge thanks to my Divine Level channel members here on YouTube, Academic Thick, Travis Harris, and Zors. Thank you guys so much for continuing to generously support the channel.